Hi, I'm Dr. Neil Cox from the University of Reading, and this is the second of my little talks on Wuthering Heights and narration. And if this is the first one you've seen, go back and watch the first video, because it kind of explains a little bit what I'm doing. In that video, I talked about the way that Lockwood, when he's talking about Nellie's storytelling, he kind of sees her as a cat licking the ear of its kitten. And this is what he goes on to say, and I'm going to put the quote up so you can follow my reading. I perceive that people in these regions acquire over people in towns the value that a spider in a dungeon does over a spider in a cottage to their various occupants. And yet the deepened attraction is not entirely owing to the situation of the looker-on. They do live more in earnest, more in themselves, and less in surface change and frivolous external things. I can fancy a love for life here almost possible, and I was a fixed unbeliever in any love of a year's standing. One state resembles setting a hungry man down to a single dish on which he may concentrate his entire appetite and do it justice. The other, introducing him to a table laid out by French cooks. He can perhaps extract as much enjoyment from the whole, but each part is a mere atom in his regard and resemblance. Okay, where to begin here? Well, I guess let's just kind of make sense of this. Initially, he said, look, listening to Nellie is like looking at a cat licking its kitten. And if Nellie doesn't include one part of the story in her tale, it's like watching a cat that's neglecting cleaning the ear of its young. He kind of develops this by now saying, look, it's a bit like if people in the country see a spider, they go, oh, that's really fascinating, that's a really interesting spider. And I should add that I'm speaking here from the country, but apparently we kind of are endlessly fascinated by spiders when they appear, whereas people in the city just go, oh, spider, whatever, and kind of move on. I'm kind of, one way to begin to thinking about what is weird about this is, I guess, thinking about this in terms of Lockwood setting up a difference between himself and those that he sees. Because this is kind of the story he's telling anyone that will hear, is that he is a kind of he's a kind of a depressed, lovesick person who feels kind of alienated from life, but slowly he's finding a kind of commonality with the people that he's with. Of course, we know he's a pretty deluded guy and he doesn't really get what's going on at all. But there's something odd here. They do live more in earnest, he says. More in themselves and less in surface change and frivolous external things. What strikes me here is the way that this language really echoes, in some sense, what Cathy says of Heathcliff and why she loves him in a way she can never love Edgar. You know, there is a rejection of surface, of change, of external things. This could almost be the first steps into a great evocation of the eternal rocks below, couldn't it, in one sense? In another sense, of course, that he doesn't really kind of get it at all, because it's not for Cathy that she lives more in herself, but rather that she lives as someone else. I am Heathcliff. It's her radical division that makes being herself and being happy impossible. These are split people. And Lockwood kind of doesn't really get that. All he sees is a kind of inner content, I think. As we kind of move on from that, he says, I could fancy a love for life here almost possible when I was a fixed unbeliever in any love of a year standing. One state resembles setting a hungry man down to a single dish. So he's saying, look, if you're in the country and you just become fascinated by spiders, it's like him being fascinated by Nellie's tale. You just fix on the one thing and get really satisfied with it. And that's like a hungry man just sitting down to a single modest dinner and enjoying it. That's what country living is like for Lockwood. And the kind of city living is like being at a table and there being all these amazing French cooks and you get this incredible meal. And the whole meal itself is probably as enjoyable as the single modest portion, yeah. But the little bits, yeah, aren't that significant. One of the things that's odd here is the metaphor is kind of shifted. Because with the cat and the kitten, what is really important is the idea of the part. In focusing all your attention on this one seemingly trivial thing, the cat cleaning its kitten, what also comes to light, what also comes to attention is the idea of the part. That the kitten is in parts, that an ear is a part that can be neglected, and that's why it's so important for Nellie not to miss any part. The tail is made up of parts. Yet, as he kind of changes his analogy and starts to talk about eating, and notice the shift here, that strange shift from licking to eating. Yeah. Those two things are not the same, but there is a kind of a weight on them to be acting in some way in the same sense, I think. As we shift, what we get actually is extravagance and city living being the thing that becomes the part, made up of parts. The idea of the part is both the most essential thing, the ear, the part of the story that cannot be lost. But it is also the most inessential thing, an atom, that has no real sense of remembrance or importance. Nell is actually saying, let's skip over this, it's not important to remember. Lockwood is saying, no, everything is important to remember. But as he tries to expand on that and explain that, he ends up tangled in a new metaphor in which reducing or dividing something up into little bits becomes actually an exercise that makes each bit, each part, trivial. When we're consuming literature, when we're looking at stories, is what is important an idea of an indivisible whole? Or is what is important the individual part? Within the space of one paragraph, Lockwood moves from one to the other.